Good morning, Whisky Show. Welcome. We're in day 6 now, and we're joining for the 5th Black Tot Rum 101 session today. My name is Mitch Wilson, Global Ambassador for Black Tot Rum, and all of this week we're going to be interviewing various people and looking at different angles of the rum industry as a sort of introduction if you're just getting into rum from the whiskey world, or if you have a friend who is looking to get more into rum. Hopefully this will be a nice video series for you to tempt them. And peering from backstage, we have my very special guest for today, Mr. Billy Abbott. So, Billy, welcome.
Hello. Sorry about that. Unfortunately, being an organizer of the show and having all these mysterious privileges, if I hit a button, I suddenly appear rather than
straight in.
So I just jumped out and I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting. Anyway, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I join you today from the boardroom at the Whisky Exchange in the middle of Sukinda's collection. I have a light on, which means it looks like a Zoom background, but I promise you, look, I can actually... it's actually real. I can touch it, and now I put fingerprints on the window, and Diego will kill me. But
your car's already running. The tripwires have been set off.
I can't go over that side of the room where the silly corner over there. Can't go near them. Yeah, I'm not allowed to touch the Macallans. So, but no, I'm sat here enjoying the ambience and the chilled nature of the room due to the fact that temperature control to make sure the bottles don't evaporate away. So, yes,
it's a wonderful room. Probably the most exciting thing in Park Royal, I'd say.
Apart from my house, because of course I live here. Remember,
yes.
Don't you diss in my manor.
I haven't seen your back bar yet, Billy, so I don't know.
It's quite random. I will admit that right at the beginning. It's more less a back bar, more an accumulation. I think is probably the best way of putting it. So.
Wonderful. Well, so today, for anyone who's joining us, our topic for today's Rum 101 is titled Esters, Funk, Dunder and Muck, Finding a Rum for the PPM and Quadruple IPA Hop Junkie in Your Life. And you are that junkie for me, Billy. You are. I'm going to try and find you some rums today. But I think as well, what we want to try and cover is whether you're coming in from the beer world, the whiskey world, or the rum world, we're going to sort of link some of the extremities of flavor that we see cross over and the kind of people who enjoy these extremities of flavor across all categories. So that if you're a beer lover, hopefully we can pique your interest in some rum, and the same with people coming in from the whiskey world. So to start off, Billy, to jump right into it, I thought we should look at the sort of raw material first of all. So I guess we've got, for our quadruple IPAs, I actually put that as a joke, and then I Googled quadruple IPA and of course found quadruple IPA does exist now.
Yes. There has definitely been an escalation over the last few years of, if I make a number slightly bigger, yeah, people will buy more of it. I blame the Belgians. I'm blaming the Belgians for many things when it comes to beer.
So I guess the three main areas we're looking at are, of course, our IPAs, our very heavily hopped India Pale Ales, our peat monsters, usually I'm guessing exclusively coming from Islays, although I've seen some peat being used in other areas too, and various mixes. And then, of course, the obvious example in the rum is our ester funk bombs coming from Jamaica as well. So we're going to look at all of these sort of areas for you today.
And on the beer side, I've got some examples with me, some things I brought from home, which unfortunately, as Mitch and me are in different parts of the world, I'm not going to open for the moment. But next time he's around, I shall crack some. I'm not sure about this one. This one's really special. I might have to save that for an actual proper occasion rather than just seeing Mitch. But
outrageous.
I've got some interesting bits just to wave around in front of the camera as examples. And outside of the really hoppy beers, there's some other flavors which are really associated. If you're looking at the extreme rum side of things which sort of match up more is on the extreme end of beer as well. The hop is the big thing at the moment, but there's other stuff we've been doing in the beer world for a while as well, which I think is also going to be a little bit interesting.
Fantastic. Well, let's jump right in then. So let's begin with our IPAs and the addition of hops. Now, obviously, this practice goes back quite far and actually goes back. There's a nice little Navy rum crossover here with long voyages over to India and the addition of extra hops and the start of this. So can you tell us a little bit more about this background and why these very intense flavored beers were originally created?
Yeah, so beer has not been a single thing over time. So originally, beer is very, very, very hard. When you talk about, there's all these different definitions over the years of beer and ale and all these different things. And they're all very confused and people use different things. But generally, beer as a overarching thing is smashed up grain of some kind, fermented with yeast. There we go. You generally you filter out the bits, but not always. But one of the things about beer is it goes off quite quick. And so people would add different things to it to hopefully preserve it, make it taste nicer, and allow it to keep going for longer. And so hops were one of the first preservative sort of things added to beer. And it was not only for preservation, but it also tastes nice.
Yeah.
But it has this bitterness. And the thing about hops also is when you add it, will give different flavors. So if a beer, generally what you do is you smash your grains up and you steep them, and then you boil your strained off liquid. And boiling the strained off liquid sterilizes it, so you don't get any sort of like any leftover bugs in there. You have the yeast will be able to work on their own. But also during this, you can add flavor. And so you add your hops during that part and it extracts these bitter compounds, and the bitter compounds help preserve the beer. Alpha acids, beta acids, all these sorts of things. So the more hops you add at that point, the more bitter the beer, but the more preservative effect you get. And the hops we're seeing these days are added after that point and add very different flavors. So the beginning of the sort of the heavily hop side of things in England, people talk about how it was initially just for these long voyages, but the style was developing before then anyway. There's a book called Amber, Gold and Black by Martin Cornell, who's a fantastic beer writer. If you can find a copy of the book, I thoroughly recommend it. It seems to be going for like 150 quid on Amazon these days. Wow. It cost me 8 quid when I bought it, just like, a couple of years back. So small run. If you can get hold of it, amazing. I've been told if you look on the Oxfam website, there's a few copies knocking around. But the history of pale ales, which is where hoppy beers have come from, is long, is interesting. It's moving from smoky fuels to smokeless fuels, and also the expansion of the British Empire. And so in the end, one of the things they did was that they heavily hopped beers to allow them to survive the voyage from the UK to other parts of the world, Caribbean, India, and India Pale Ale became a sort of brand name for this style of beer, which were heavily hopped to help us survive the voyages, but was also enjoyed at home. Right. And one of the things about hop flavor in beer is that it develops over time. And so one of the things about IPA was if you drank it fresh in London, you got a very different beer to the beer you ended up when it arrived in India 6 months later. And so even back then, there was this idea of fresh beer and non-fresh beer. And that's been expanded at the current day. For example, I have here a lovely can of Verdant Mary Lou, which very specifically on the back says, drink fresh, hops fade fast. And on the bottom of the can, it tells me that this was canned on the 2nd of September. So I've had this for 4 weeks, which is a record for me and a load of Verdant beer, I have to say. And it says best before March. And that's 6 months on that. And 6 months, that will taste nothing like now. It won't taste anything like it did 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago, I tried one, bit oniony. Now, fruit bomb. And give it another 6 months, and it will take, again, like these beers that went over to India, the fruit will have faded and all that side of things, and you end up with this lovely sort of bitter core, sort of like grainy, barley, winey intensity. And this, beer develops, and this is one of the things about those old IPAs was the style they wanted was the style when it arrived in India. But as you say, the great connection with the naval traditions, because as we know, Navy rum's a big thing, but around the time that naval rum was being put into place, beer was the standard thing people were trying to drink, and trying to keep it live and not horrible for an entire voyage was very difficult.
Absolutely. And so the original, obviously coming from England, you would take beer because we were a beer drinking country, and different naval forces from around Europe would take whatever their local wine was, or beer or spirit or whatever it was. And in the original Navy Code, which was published in 1731, you have the caveat of every man on board is entitled to 8 pints of beer per day, or the equivalent in half a pint of overproof spirit. So it was very much, I think, taken on board. And certainly those early years, you would take beer on the way out and then probably bring rum on the way back, So it was, you had an equivalent. But one of the things that we found, talking with Matt Pietrek from cocktailwonk.com, who's been doing a lot of research into this, is that not just the hops, but the actual ABV of the beer would change accordingly. So a longer voyage would have a higher ABV beer for longer voyages. Shorter voyages would be lower ABV. But also the beer companies would often screw them over if they could and sell you the low ABV beer at the high ABV price. So, being able to measure and actually quantify what you were getting in the barrel became a sort of issue early on. So would that play a factor as well in terms of do we see, is there a correlation between adding more hops and always having a more alcoholic beer as well? Is that sort of fairly standard practice, or?
Yeah, well, it's one of those ones where it depends again where you add the hop and things like that. If you have, again, when it comes to the balance of flavour, these days it's not so much we're adding the hops to preserve it. The hops are there as a flavouring agent at various different times. Some beers outside of the more traditional pale ale tradition, which if you get time, I've got a lovely one to demonstrate it. But most of the time, we're not talking about preservation anymore. We're talking purely about flavour. So in the boil, it's all about extracting bitter flavours. And then in dry hopping afterwards, or adding late additions into the boil, you're then looking at stuff which is not going to be extracted during boiling and heating, the more delicate compounds, which can be extracted in a cooler liquid. And so the alcohol just comes down to the amount of grain you put in, the amount of sugar you have in there, the amount of flavor, because you get a load of flavor with higher alcohol, you get intensity of flavor because you put more grain in. The more grain you put in, the more sugar you put in. Although you can tweak that around with grains with flavor but no sugar because they've been cooked, and beer's got lots of levers you can pull to do different things. But generally, more alcohol means more flavor, and so with that, you generally add more hops. Otherwise, the hops get lost under the other flavors. And so that correlation these days is very much about flavor. Because if you go for your quadruple IPA, which do exist, and they do hurt you if you drink them. There's I think it's Unhuman Cannonball from Magic Rock, which is like a tall can of 16% beer, and bleed from the eyes. But no. I've got some stupid 16% pint cans of stuff in my fridge I bought out in America while drunk, and should definitely not have bought them. But no, there's the higher strength stuff is from those old school sort of naval focused IPAs. Is all about preservation, because alcohol is a preservative, and so a higher strength beer will last for longer without souring, and that's really what they're going for. And I only really sort of discovered this sort of style of beer comparatively recently. So about 20 years ago, Gale's Seafarers IPA appeared in my local pub. I live in West London, have done for the last 25 years. And so Fuller's is my go-to brewery. Fuller's bought Gale's. And Gale's Seafarer was a 7.5%, I think, 6 to 7%, which at the time was quite strong. 20 years ago, we were still not breaking the 5% mark on loads of beer. So, this stuff is just an everyday pale ale, and this is 5.2. This would have been a beer 20 years ago. Changed our way we do beer quite a lot. But the Seafarers, I was like 6.5%, 7%, and it was intensely hoppy with hop bitterness.
Right.
And that was the thing you just didn't see. And then I tried a beer from the US. I tried a load of beer in the US, Sierra Nevada especially, which had a fresh hop character to it, as well as this big bitterness. And I tried a Dogfish Head 120-minute IPA on cask at the Great British Beer Festival. And this is beer which is boiled for 2 hours. Normally you go for about an hour boil. This is a 2 hour boil with constant hop additions. And so you're just pulling bitterness after bitterness after bitterness out of these things. And then they shipped it over from the US in cask, which was just amazing. Got to try it. Had my pint, which cost me like £10 back in 2002, 2003, whatever. But it's like, right, got to get this and share it with everybody. And it turned my face inside out with bitterness. And so, but that was really, really high strength and loads of hops, because that flavor during the boil was balanced. If you just had it without the background beer, one of the things you find in a lot of new style hoppy beers is you can taste the hops, and the hops are trying to hide the grain bill. And so lower strength beers where you put a load of hop on top, it becomes hop juice rather than beer. And often the grain bills for the beers, they don't support the hoppy flavor. So these days about flavor, as I say, it's one of those ones where you need to get that balance right. Otherwise you just don't get something that tastes nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's move on to then our sort of second section, which is our peat, and how this comes in to whiskey. So obviously we talked about hops almost being almost a logistical necessity in terms of getting beers that will travel further and then later becoming a flavor profile as well that is just enjoyed. What are the originations of using peat in whiskey, and why did that start?
Oh, a similar idea really. It was a necessity. Even now, when you talk about the ingredients of whiskey, people will say, it's just barley, water, and thyme, and this sort of thing. People have started including yeast as an ingredient for years. Yeast, and in beer in Germany, when they have the purity laws, yeast isn't listed as an ingredient because it's not an ingredient; it's a processing thing. It's almost considered to be the same as a pan. The pot you boil stuff in, and yeast are both. It's a bit more to it now. You can choose different flavors with them, but it was never considered really an ingredient until more recently when people understood what it was a lot more. And peat, similarly, is just part of the process. And even now, it's often thought of that way. People are bringing in more information about peat. But Scotland, due to, I've been told by Scottish friends of mine, English people chopping down all the trees to make warships to try and conquer the world, they don't necessarily have the largest array of forests up in Scotland anymore. So wood in Scotland for many years was a building material and wasn't used as fuel so much because it wasn't a thing which you had loads of. And for the sort of burning that you need to do to dry out peat, you need lots of big chunks of wood, and that's not really the way they did things. But peat was a very readily fuel source. If peat is basically vegetation that decomposes in an oxygen-free environment. So let's just say your tree falls over into a really damp and muddy patch of ground, which Scotland, to be honest, has quite a lot of damp and muddy patches. So all your vegetation underwater, decomposing, being compressed, eventually will become coal. On the way to coal, you end up with peat, which is this big, thick, fibrous, decomposed matter, which when you dry it out, burns. And it burns really nice and hot, and it burns completely. When you start it going, it's very difficult to stop peat from burning. Even now, I think I read somewhere that there's thousands of peat fires burning all over the world because they'll burn underground or they'll seemingly stop burning, but someone will dig a hole, oxygen gets in, boom, goes up again. It's like coal mines and things like that. You still have those fires going on. So peat burns really well. So standard fuel source across Scotland. Even today, if you walk through the streets of Bamore or Port Charlotte over on Islay, it still in the winter smells of peat because people burn peats on the fire. That's what you use to heat your house. And so when you're initially drying out barley malt, you malt by getting things wet and dry, tricking them into growing. When they just about started growing and they convert some sugar and create all the enzymes you need, you dry it out to stop the process, and you have a thing which can then continue the process of making booze a lot more efficiently than another grain, which hasn't been malted. But to dry it out, you need heat. So originally in Scotland, they used peat because that's what they had. These days, it's very easy to generate hot air, as I'm doing currently, but also just in general machines and things like that. And back at the back end of the 1800s, I think it was, when smokeless fuels started becoming a much more general thing, you didn't have to have smoke involved in your drying process. And you do get some tales of coal fired malting plants, which mean you potentially get some coal smoke in your barley. But most of the time you end up with people drying stuff out with smokeless fuels. This led to the pale ale revolution, because that way you can now dry your barley out, your malt out, using these things to get much paler coloured malts without so much heat. But in the peat side of things, it became such a distinctive part of some Scotch whiskies flavours that even though the technology exists not to use it, what we do now is we use peat as a choice to add those flavors. So back in the day, as you say, it was a processing thing. You had to use peat because it's what you had to actually create the raw material you needed to start the process of whiskey making. But now it really is a case of just dial in how much smoke you want.
And we're going to come on to more definitions about how much smoke and how that's measured and how that plays out in the geek world as well. But let's so going on to our third raw material, we now move into the world of dunder and muck, which is our lovely little secret sauce, which we have over in specifically it's talked about over in Jamaica. But dunder itself is essentially available everywhere in the rum producing world. So when we use the term dunder, what we're talking about is we've fermented our molasses, we've got it to the distillation process, put it in our pot still, done our distillation, and the leftover wash in that process we then refer to as dunder. Now, at this stage, once everything's been distilled off from it, there's it's very acidic, but obviously no alcohol to it. But generally, it's a waste product. We'd water that down. It's often used as fertilizer. It's given to cows. There's a wonderful distillery in Australia called the Husk Distillery. And they have their own sugarcane fields and their own collection of cows there, which are all very much looked after because all the daughters are vegetarians, and so they're not allowed to do anything with the cows there.
Sorry, Brian, it's like pot ale in the whiskey world, yeah, similar.
And yeah, every year when they do their distillation runs after the harvest, they'll feed the dunder to the cows, and the cows go absolutely nuts for it. So it's quite nutrient rich. It's and if ever you walk around the sugarcane fields, these cows will stalk you, waiting like, have you got any dunder? Have you got? They're quite wonderful things. So dunder's an interesting substance. I say usually a waste product, and usually just got rid of however needed. If it's put into the ground or sometimes pumped into the sea. Usually you water it down first, not because it's necessarily poisonous, but because it is so nutrient rich. It can actually affect the ecology of a local area and cause an imbalance in whatever's feeding off it in that place. So.
Well, in the Dornoch Firth in Scotland, they Glenmorangie and Balblair both, I think, put their pot ale into the sea, into the Dornoch Firth. And there were some sort of environmental concerns, and the Scottish Environment Agency, checked it out and found it is the most diverse sea life in the entirety of the coast of Scotland. Yes. And they just all live around the outlet pipes, and there's just, as you say, ridiculously nutrient-rich thing popping out, and the fish love it. So
it was exactly the same. The West Indies rum distillery in Barbados has a sort of pipe that goes out quite far into the sea because they were like, oh, let's get it off the coast and make sure it's further out, and they did a test around the outlet of the pipe there, and it was just absolutely thriving. So to balance it out, they water it down a lot more now. So Chris just pointed out the great session yesterday that they did with dunder versus sour mash as well, which is another good comparison for all of this kind of stuff. So dunder in essence, it's our leftover wash post distillation, normally discarded, but in Jamaica specifically, we actually see it reused. And Jamaica has six distilleries, 3 of them specifically reuse the dunder, which are Hampton Estates, Long Pond, and Clarendon. And this dunder can be added either into your new fermented batch of molasses, or it can actually be put straight into, if you've got a double retort pot still, you can actually add the dunder into one of the retorts there to, again, add extra acid to your process, because acid plus alcohol equals esters. And creating these high ester rums is one of the Jamaican sort of specific points of difference we do there. But we also have this other sort of interesting little thing going on, which is called a muck pit. And the muck pits are sort of the secret sauce, if you like, and are a sort of often just a trough in the ground full of rotting sugarcane and jackfruits and rotten pineapples and all sorts of different things that basically create its own sort of bacteria, yeasty ecosystem. And it smells absolutely terrible and horrible. But then what you do is you add some of that into your fermentation as well. And again, that extra hit of wild yeasts and acids and everything, just get everything bubbling away. And I've actually got a little picture. This was, I think I'm allowed to share this with you, but we will anyway. This was sent to me by Kate Perry, who works over with Hampton over in the United States. And this is a little glimpse of what that sort of festering fermentation looks like with some of the muck added to it. And those little sort of bubbly things you see they're not crocodiles.
I was about to say, they look just like crocodiles, mate. Yeah.
Though apparently you have the last crocodiles in existence very near to where they are in Hampton in Cockpit Country. But
I hear that. That's a very important part of the distillery story as well. Yeah.
It's on the label. But yes, you have the jackfruits in there, and you can see some of the cane stalks, and it's like real nasty stuff. But for a rum lover, of course, this is exactly what we're after. So this is just another little part of the secret sauce. And then what happens in these Jamaican rums, we create these very high ester rums, or ester marks that we call. We have different ester levels. So in Jamaica, you can have anywhere from 0 up to 1,600 grams per hectoliter of pure alcohol. And this sometimes where it gets a little bit confusing, because you can have hundreds of different types of esters and flavors and types like that. But the only ester we actually measure for the purposes of having a number on the bottle is ethyl acetate. So ethanol plus acetic acid, so essentially vinegar. That one was essentially the easiest to measure and the most commonly available. So across all the different types of rum, if you were going to measure an ester level, that would be the one that would be most readily present and easily to measure back in the day. But saying you have 100 esters in your rum or 200 esters in your rum, all we're talking about is the weight of that ethyl acetate itself, not how many different types of esters or flavors there are going on. I guess in terms of our origin story of why this started, essentially it was a blending tool, being able to have very high ester rums and adding a little bit of that into our blend. So for instance, we do it with Black Tot. We add some 3-year-old Long Pond into our finest Caribbean rum. We've added some Hampton into our new up and coming 50th anniversary. So we have a little 9-year pot still Hampton going into this guy as well. And adding those higher esters adds a beautiful funk and a beautiful intensity, and adds a lot more depth and character to your rum. But it was also used for less flavorful purposes and more nefarious purposes back in the day. Specifically in Germany, we had a type of rum called Rum Verschnitt, which was essentially a workaround to the taxes placed on molasses and rum back in the day. So rather than buy 100 barrels of very heavily taxed and expensive rum, you could buy 1 barrel of very high ester rum, add a little bit of that high ester to a neutral grain spirit, add some caramel coloring, and ta-da, it looks, smells, and tastes kind of like rum. So nowadays we're seeing obviously plenty of releases, and I think, and this is one of the sort of comparisons we're going to be looking at today, but we're now seeing these bottlings of very high ester rums on their own. So people are getting to try, 1,000 ester rums, 1,500 ester rums, 1,600 ester rums, which traditionally would have just been for blenders to put into something else, not to be drunk on their own. But of course, we have rum lovers and rum nerds who are like, oh yes, 1500 ester rum, delicious, wonderful, much
as the eye flickers, as if, oh, that's really
yes.
lovely. Oh,
if I'm not crying whilst I drink this rum, it's not high ester enough.
Will it strip paint off a wall? Oh, excellent. That's almost what I'm after. Yeah. And I say this as somebody who likes high ester things. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I suppose my first sort of inkling into how all of these things connected and linked up was a few years back. A friend of mine who runs a brilliant bottle store in Australia, in Sydney, called the Oak Barrel. And Scott, who runs there, is kind of the champion of bringing in amazing spirits into Australia, because Australia tends to be anywhere from 5 to 10 years behind the rest of the world in terms of getting anything. But he was bringing in these high ester rums, and he was like, it's incredible. And he said to me, he was like, this is exactly how the whiskey world was 10 years ago, where it was just like, give me the peatiest thing you've got, like if I don't have lung cancer every time I drink this, it's not smoky enough, And he was like, the exact same people who love that intensity of flavor in whiskey are coming for it in rum as well. So
yeah, well, it's one of the developments you often find when it comes to flavor is the extremophiles stop coming out. We have in the rum world, have the ridiculous high ester stuff. In the whiskey world, you have the high peat in the super sherry cask. Literally this morning, we have just put on sale, or just about to put on sale, I've got it on my desk to write tasting notes, a Highland Park that is opaque. It is so sherried. Right. And it's just absolutely insane. This big sherry monster thing about extreme of flavor, or wine casks. And in the beer world, we sort of talked about the IPA thing. So this is, now lists on the back of it, what hops is being put in there, and some beers actually now tell you grams per litre of hop. That sort of thing. But the one I want to show off on the extreme beer side of things is this is some Drie and Eau de Gueuze. So this is a sour beer from Brussels, just outside Brussels, in the Lambic region, and this is a sour beer, so it's spontaneously fermented, and it's just left to sort of like in barrels to in casks to ferment and then mature. And Gueuze is specifically a blend of 1, 2, and 3-year-old beer, and the whole thing being that it mellows over time, and so you have that blending of the intense young beer and the more mellow older beer, so you get a sort of more balanced flavor. And the sour beer world starts, with these sort of things as commercial products, which nobody really drank very many of. And someone tries one and goes, wow, that's so sour. And then the brewer goes, what can I do to make a more sour beer? What can I do to use more wild yeast than anybody else? And so the extremeness of sour beers has got to the point now where Brewdog did one with an acidity of like pH of like 2 and a bit, which, as far as I can tell, is going to hurt you if you drink very much of it. Just literally on medical nature, it will hurt you. And that was their whiskey sour beer, which tasted like a whiskey sour because it properly creased your eye up and everything like that without quite so much sugar in. But then you also get things like, this. So I've got here a bottle of Orval. Orval's dosed with Brettanomyces before it goes in the bottle to generate, so it can re-ferment in the bottle slowly. But the thing about Brett is that it's very, very, it's an off flavor in wine, and it's very sort of horse blankety and things like that. And you get weirdos like me who, so this one is been in bottle now for 2 and a bit years. So that's going to be like I was saying earlier on, like licking the side of a horse. That is that sort of flavor. And again, it's these extremes of flavor that people look for. Orval starts out with, standard Belgian sort of like Trappist beer. Really quite nice, sort of banana-y, that side of the estuary sort of thing, some phenol, sort of clovey sort of notes in there as well. Now it tastes like bananas rubbed on the side of a horse. It's looking for those extremes of flavor. I've got bottles of this which are another year or so old, which I'm waiting for a bit longer to see how far it goes. You get people who leave bottles of Gueuze for 7, 8, 10, 9. 9 is the number that Jean Vanois from Cantillon, which is like hailed as the biggest and the best. He says 9. After 9, doesn't really change very much more. But if you leave it, it re-ferments in bottle, and all the sweetness disappears. You end up with things that are just brutally sour, and people are looking for that. And this is where your quad IPA comes along. It gets to this point where people say, right, how many hops can I stick in this thing? Keep on putting some hop. No. Make it so that it's more hop than beer. Make it into a sludge of hop and liquid, and let that ferment. What's happened? It's got infected and it's gone horrible. But there is this thing of, it's all about, excuse me, extremes of how far you can push the envelope. People really want in flavour, whether it be in whiskey, whether it be in rum, whether it be in beer. And the progression I've seen is whiskey started this 10 some years ago. I saw on Islays we had Octomore appeared. Ardbeg were going about how they were really smoky, and completely by coincidence, according to Ardbeg, it was nothing to do with the fact that Bruichladdich released a really, really peaty one at the same time, that they then upped the peat on the next one. I did a tasting with Mickey Heads right at the beginning of the festival, and she said, "Oh yeah, it was just a complete coincidence," and then moved on very quickly. But yeah, so Octomore came in to push that boundary. In the beer world, we've now seen this explosion of hops, but also earlier on, I think as Chris was saying in the chat, there's lots of delicious imperial stouts in these high-end ranges, and pushing the ABV has become the imperial stout thing. That, and how many different weird adjuncts can you add? I've got a chocolate blueberry salted caramel stout at only 17%. It will make your eyes explode. That sort of thing. Chris says Omnipollo. Omnipollo, this brewery, not really a brewery. Some people come up with recipes, and other breweries make their beer for them. But it's all about creating these ridiculous flavors. And Omnipollo aren't always about high strength, but it's extremes of flavor in those cases. You go to beer festivals, they're the guys with slushy machines, and so you'll get your blueberry slab cake stout with blueberry slab cake stout slushy piped on top from a slushy machine, and that's your beer. It's pushing to silly levels and across everything, And say rum is the more recent one of the various different spirits that I deal with, day to day. Gin's gone silly. We got unicorn flavored shimmer gin. Okay, trust me, that shark has been jumped. Okay, shimmer gin, seriously. The rum, when it comes to the sort of the more serious pushing of an envelope, the high ester thing is something which I'm intrigued by, because more than all the others, levels of peat, it's all about measurements and it's a bit hand wavy. But when it comes to the measurement of esters, it starts bringing in science and starts bringing in people looking into production and understanding production more. And a few years ago, if you talked about the fact that fatty acids and alcohols combine to form esters, you'd have a room full of rum people going, don't care.
Yeah.
Daiquiri. But now you have people going, yes. And did you know that if you combine acetic acid with ethanol, and that is specifically going to create, thingy, whatever you just said it was. But understanding the different fatty acid Fischer, I think they're Fischer reactions. I was speaking to Don Livermore from Hiram Walker, and after we did an interview, we sat and just chatted about Fischer reactions for 20 minutes, because he knows all this stuff. He's a doctor of this sort of thing. But now that's coming into the rum world. People in rum are really looking into production, and you can talk about dunder and muck, and people aren't scared. You could talk about a double retort still. A couple of years back, I was trying to find out how a double retort worked, and I couldn't find people in my little circle who could explain how it worked. I've now done WSET level 3 spirits, and I had to describe how a double retort worked in my exam. I think I got full marks on that bit. Not everything else. I think I got full marks on that. But no, it's incredible that people, due to this extremophile thing, it opens up a world of production, but to other people who want to know about it, or across all these different. I can tell you how to make Belgian style sour beer and lambics. I can tell you the entire process, because people pushing the extreme has revealed that and opened it up. And I find that's the thing I find most interesting about this, is it's exposing the underside of how it all works at the same time as creating brand new, really incredible drinks for people to try.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to see how how much science and how much production process is people are willing to get into and really study and learn, just to, you know, almost be able to out geek the next person on it. But there's a fascination with it. There's such a great interest with it. And what's interesting is that, you know, once the demand is there, you start to see new products coming out to meet that need. You know, like you've had the Long Pond Tekka, you know, coming out, which is from the Bellier releases, this Long Pond pot still 1500, 1600 ester rum, and it's like rocket fuel, you know. And Chris
is so good. I tried it in this room a couple of years ago, just before Rumfest. We had like a gathering of the great and good in the cupboard here. It's a gigantic boardroom. You can hear from the echo, and on the table, everybody brought random rums in, and there was the Long Ponds were there. And I was trying going, how can people drink it? I quite like it. I'm not going to say no to trying the next one, but still, it's not. It's a drink which is not like, you know, if you go and find yourself a nice, easy, everyday going whiskey or rum or beer, whatever. It's this thing you sit there and drink and go, yeah. The Long Ponds, they're not things you do that with. They're things that you drink for interest, that you focus on them. They're not a thing which allows you to not focus on them when you're drinking them. If something starts attacking the back of your sinuses while you're drinking, you know it's trying to get your attention. You know, it's
I remember, because Chris got a wonderful selection over in Amsterdam, and it was, we were trying it, and I was like, oh, you know, it's very interesting, but you wouldn't want to drink that all the time. It's like, oh yes, that's how rum should be. It's wonderful. I'm like,
that's a good point, because out of choice, I do drink ridiculous hop bombs and the sourest of sour beers that strips the enamel off my teeth. So yeah, I can see it. You know, each to their own. But it is one of those ones where those extremeness is, you know. But just interestingly brought up by Brian in the chat. He says, oh, like the triple witchy at Mortlach. So. The Wee Witchy is a third still they have at Mortlach Distillery, which their production process is they double distill, but some of the whiskey is transferred through another production thing and is redistilled in the Wee Witchy, and it's all combined back at the end. And they released the information about this when people started digging into production processes. They've never really explained it very well. And on the newly launched Mortlach bottles, not the current range, but the previous one, I can't remember if they're on the current one, they put 2.81 times distilled, because some of it's distilled 2 times over 3. And that really felt like it was not telling people how it worked. It wasn't giving that information. It wasn't telling you how those things were created, it seemed to be science for science's sake. It was science for marketing, you know. And the 2.81, I asked the brand ambassador of the time, who is a friend of mine, many questions about Mortlach, and every single one she answered quickly, immediately, no hesitation whatsoever. And I said, how'd you get 2.81 then? And that's an answer I've never received from anybody at Diageo, is how I know the answer is somebody somewhere geekily sat there and tried to plug in some numbers and came up with something that looked nice on a bottle. And that's what it is. You know, Springbank, in a similar but slightly different way, they talk about how Springbank itself, whiskey, is distilled 2.5 times. And they have a ridiculously complicated diagram on the wall at the distillery, which I was having a chat with a guy from Springbank the other day, and he said, I have no idea what that diagram means. It confuses people more than anything else. But they don't try and use it in their marketing. It's just sit there. If you're a geek, you want to know about it, they'll tell you. And they have a diagram which explains it. And yeah, so the thing for the Wee Witchy and people being told about the Wee Witchy, it doesn't really make sense. It's just there literally as we have an interesting thing. It is actually interesting, but it's not presented in the same way. It doesn't open up information. It's like one of my standard rants is transparency is great. However, most of the stuff that you stick in, you know, the Bruichladdich, brilliant distillery, love them to bits, and they put loads of information about every single bottle, and you can type in a link off the back of your bottle and it tells you all the stuff about it, and you look at that and you go, none of this is relevant. None of it is relevant at all. Doesn't tell me anything, and knowing that does not change anything. When you look at things like talking about high esters and things like that, that information, or the hops that are being used, or the grams per litre of hop, that side of things that is direct things which are part of the recipe and are outputs and are measurable, and you can look at it and say, okay, so in this spirit, that's the level of this. So I compare these two. I can see the different levels. I can see how they're expressed in different ways. These are the list of different hop names, and these are the intensities of these things. From this, I can work out these things. Here's a big pile of casks, which we just mixed together. Oh, and by the way, the guy who distilled its name's Brian. This is not necessarily information that's it makes you feel more connected to the brand, but it's more marketing than it is actually understanding the process.
And this is one of the questions I wanted to throw at you as well, because we see these numbers, we see more transparency, we see more information coming, whether that's on the label or on the website or being shared with people. And esters is a good example for us in the rum world, because, as I say, it doesn't tell you the total different types of esters or the variety of esters and flavors that you're getting. It's a measurement of one particular ester, which was a blending tool more than anything else. And for us, really saying I like a lot of esters is like saying I like loud music. I like my music turned up to 10 or 11. Okay,
it's one louder right here.
Yeah. Well, what type of music? It doesn't matter. I just like loud music. It's one measuring stick out of several, which doesn't really give you much information other than a yardstick of whether I'm able to drink tougher rum than you. It's like having, I think Dawn mentioned the other day, like having a vindaloo, like being able to, I can eat spicier curry than you can,
Yeah.
And are you seeing the same thing happen in the world of beer and whiskey as well?
Well, I say in the beer world, people are now trying to give more information about. So again, hops per liter, grams per liter. Again, it's a stick. It is a stick. It's a thing which tells you a measurement. It doesn't break things down. Like with the esters, it gives you the esters is a specific ester. This is the combined total. Often, if you really want to dig, they'll quite happily tell you. If it's one of the brewers who are writing that at the back of a can, they'll tell you their entire recipe. They'll ask you to come down and watch them make it, and they'll make you taste bits and pieces of stuff you don't want to taste. It's that sort of thing. If you want to find that information out, you can. But often, as I said, as you just said there, and as I said, a lot of the transparency is just transparency for transparency's sake. Some of it draws people in, and the thing which I think is important are the ones which draw people in, and then there is more information behind it. So, on the ester front, there's a number on a bottle. But if you speak to the brand, they can then talk to you about what they're doing. And often in the rum world, if they're putting an ester number on the bottle, they're a brand who's going to tell you more about the way they make their rum, more about the flavors present in the rum, more about the that side of things. But if you go and have a chat with someone about Mortlach, and as Brian just said, told Mortlach, asked the stillman, how does the distillation process work? And he couldn't explain it. That's fairly standard. He just says, well, I just followed the list of instructions. I don't really understand why it, and the people who are doing it don't really understand it. And as I say, I know very few people who can explain the Mortlach distillation process, but most people don't care. And it is one of those ones where, a lot of the time, this information is just for the reasons of being able to say that you know it. An anonymous person who is still anonymous, a distiller from the USA, wrote me an article from my own blog, spiritedmatters.com, small plug for me, years and years ago about transparency. And he just wrote this thing, and he just repeatedly dug into what information he could give you about the distillation process, and got down to this ridiculous level of detail and said, what does any of that tell you about the flavor of the final product? What is that? None of this is useful on its own. Every single piece of this tells you nothing. The only way that you'll know how this all goes together is if I tell you why I did it, if I tell you the context of it. All of these things, every single piece of this could be twiddled in a different way to make a different flavor at the end. Just because you have that information doesn't actually tell you anything. He's a rather extreme end of things and does actually give all that information that people ask. But as you say, it's one of those ones where I think it's good because people want to know this information, but people want to know it, even though there's no reason for them to know it. It doesn't actually help them in their everyday life and their choices of rums and whiskies and whatever. But it's one of those ones that's constantly quest for knowledge, even if it's entirely pointless knowledge. And that's someone whose entire brain is full of pointless knowledge. I can understand it. I've dedicated my life to assembling this sort of stuff and, forgetting my family's names, for instance. But, I can tell you a load of stuff about distillation at various distilleries across Scotland, which I probably should have forgotten by now. Yeah.
So in terms of what information you would like to see on this packaging, because we have again, esters for us is one yardstick. It's also an interesting one because depending on when the rum is bottled, the actual esters you're drinking might be very different. And I'm not sure if there's any comparisons here with the PPM and the hops and everything we're talking about there, but when we ferment our molasses, we add our dunder, we add our muck, we're creating a recipe essentially that when it's distilled will give us an ester level. However, if you then age that for 20 years, you're going to have a different ester level at the end because the esterification continues on with aging. And as more oxygen gets into the barrel, as you have more angel share, the oxygen breaks down the aldehydes, it creates more esters in the liquid itself. So, and Chris and I again we've had a couple of expressions of a 29-year-old and a 35-year-old Long Pond, which were reasonably low ester levels when they were first distilled, sort of around the 200, 300 mark, but were well over 1,000 esters by the time that all of that aging had occurred. So in terms of, having that full transparency, what's in the bottle versus what it was originally distilled to as a mark, that for me is quite interesting information to have available. Do we see any similar comparisons with?
Yeah, this is the annoying thing, is the fact that you mentioned PPM, and PPM is one of the things that I am constantly critical of in the whiskey world. And the Optimore thing starts it because I haven't seen this very much often, and I think now the guys at Brocadia got much more exact handle on this, and also they don't talk about the PPM quite so much. It's a lot easier to boast about numbers, as you see in the high ester thing. Oh, I got 1,500, really? 1,600, woof. Yeah, that's not really what it's about, But in PPMs, it was always about the PPM, the parts per million of phenol, which is, again, only one of the compounds that comes from peat. It's it's a group of compounds, and anyway, but it's like a level of one aspect of the smokiness, and that's PPM in the barley. And so if in the rum case, it's not even a case of what's your ester level when you come off the still. It's like, what's the ester level of the stuff you're putting in
the fermentation process. Yeah.
And so you have, even before you hit fermentation, before you've even milled your barley, that's the point they're saying that's what the PPM in the barley is. How you mill, mash, and ferment will affect the PPM. How you distill, where you take your cuts, how you actually run the still, that will affect the PPM. And so you can have two distilleries. Let's just say you can have two distilleries on Islay who are working with barley that's between 30 and 35 ppm, opposite ends of the island, who run their stills very differently and end up with very different ppm levels in the spirit. But nobody ever talks about peating level, phenol levels in the spirit, ppm levels. Incorrect nomenclature, phenol levels in the spirit. But nobody ever talks about that. And one brand tried to, Anok, over in the Highlands, they make some peated spirit, and they talked about spirit levels of peat. And as far as I know, on their bottles, they still do. Nobody had a clue what they were talking about. And they just said, oh, so you're a lot less peaty than Islays. So no. We're as peaty as the Islays, but your number's lower. It's like, yeah, they could be measured at the useful place, not the unuseful place. And they go, but the number's lower. So that means it's not as much. That's what numbers mean. It's like, no.
Yeah.
And I was sent, maybe by mistake, an internal document, which I published and then was asked to remove again, which compared Anok spirit peating levels, because they'd done analysis and got spirit peating levels in the bottle, not even in the spirit before at maturation, but in the bottle at bottling of a load of common smoky spirits. And it put Anok in the right place and said, this is how they compare. So that when you're talking about it, and it was brilliant. It's one of the only times I've seen anybody do it in the house. Well done. But it was not a public document because it was comparing directly to other brands, and that's not the done thing. You don't talk about the other brands in your advertising. It's rude, And yeah, so PPM doesn't mean anything at all. PPM, you can manipulate your spirit and then you mature it and it will change in the cask, and generally it will drop in the cask. In the beer world, the grams per litre thing, yeah. But the big thing is people listing the hops. So here, this has got Citra, Nelson Sauvin, and Mosaic in dry hopping, and it uses Laurel for the bitter hopping. And that tells me, okay, Laurel, this is going to have this level of bitterness from it, probably because that's the way that Laurel reacts with the heat. And it also adds some flavors. These are the flavors you normally get on the hot side with that. But for dry hopping, Citra, Nelson Sauvin, and Mosaic, they're going to add a very specific type of fruitiness to it. They're going to have, Nelson Sauvin is famously like Sauvignon Blanc wine, so you get those sort of grapefruity characters. Citra is very, very citrusy because the name. Mosaic, I can't remember. I am rubbish with what hops actually give you, but I think Mosaic is towards the more sort of like pineapple-y sort of end of things as well. And so it tells you some of the flavors you're probably going to get, and that's really useful. That's again, it's useful information. It's like, here's some ingredients, you can see what they're going to do, not here's a number that doesn't really mean very much. So yeah, there's a lot of both of those sorts of things going on, and it's Fiona down in the comments has said, I love PPM, and it's one of those ones where you probably do, but the number you're looking at isn't the number that's useful. It's a number that is easy to get hold of, and that's the thing. And that's but no, it is all useful. It all does mean stuff in the end.
Well, we're seeing a similar move in the I feel like Fee would be a fun person to drink with based on her comments over the last few days. But we're seeing an interesting, in a move to try and have more useful numbers on rum bottles. One of the things that we're sort of starting to see pop up is things like volatile compounds or congeners on there, of which esters make up a part of that. So the ester number, as much as on its own, it's one particular yardstick, it does make up a larger picture of volatile compounds. And volatile compounds or congeners, essentially, we're sort of saying of flavor in your liquid. Doesn't necessarily tell you what flavors or what that's going to taste like, but the difference between the ethanol and the water, that little bit in between, is the molecules which are making up all the flavor. And this includes your volatile acidity, your aldehydes, your esters, your higher alcohols, which break down further into even more complex little subcategories. But do we see a similar thing coming in the whiskey world? Is there something like that, or something that you would like to see instead of that?
No, this is one of the things, whiskey, it's one of those ones where a lot of people are talking slightly more geekily about it, but most people, it's a very mature market and most people don't care about the geeky side. So the brands in the rum world who are doing this are the ones which appeal to the geeks. And whiskey geeks have already got their numbers and they're happy with them. And so when people start trying to do things like, we'll tell you the spirit PPM. No. Geeks going, no, don't understand it. I've got my number. I understand how that works. Don't want any more knowledge. Not everybody, and that's rude to some of the people, but it's not. It's people understand the numbers already, and people trying to create these new measures. And also Bay have SPPM, sweet parts per million. And I asked what it was. It's like, it's like a parts per million for sweetness. It's like, but what's it based on? It's like how sweet we think it is. And again, it's creating these sort of like ways of doing things. But the thing for me, and this is something that I'm really proud that we've been sort of pushing at the Whisky Exchange, and we've done it with rum as well. And I know Dawn's now looking into agave spirits because she is insane. Hello, Dawn, if you're there, you're mad. It's this whole flavor camp thing. And so for us, we're an online shop. And one of the things about being an online shop is you want to try and give people as much of an in-person shop experience as you can. And that's very difficult. You can't have that easy interaction. We have a chat on our site, and at Christmas time I join in when we're really busy, and you can do that sort of chatting with people one-to-one. But when you're just having a website, how do we offer things to people to try and give them that in-person experience? And one of the things we can do is try and give them as much information that's the sort of thing they'd ask in a shop. In a shop, you're not going to walk up to, I would, and I suspect Fee would, and other people in this chat would. You don't walk up to the salesman and say, hello, excuse me, fine sir, please could you tell me the PPM level in this bottle of whiskey, and please tell me the various different ester levels in this one here. But I am waiting, I have a notepad. That's not the sort of thing you're doing. You say, right, what's this one taste like? You go, well, this one's a bit fruitier. What sort of style do you want? Oh, I like something that's a little bit like this. Or you say, oh, I like something that's nice fruity notes to it, or a maltier thing. I want something that's maritime and smoky. I want something that's big and smoky and rich and dark. And on the rum side, you say, I want something that's big, thick, and sticky. You want something that's going to be an easy sipping rum, which is going to have a load of tropical fruit in it. You want something that's going to burn your face off with esters. Or you choose what you want. And so for us, we're trying to group things by flavor, find these broad chunks which give people that in to understand what the flavors are like. Within the individual bottles, we have our styles. We also try and give indications of how smoky, what the individual flavor things are. I try and write as many taste notes as I can. We've got my favorite complaint ever on the website the other day. It's just a glorious complaint, which is actually almost like a compliment to us, which was, why have you not written tasting notes for this one bottle in a range? Without that one bottle in a range having tasting notes, I cannot compare the various things in the range, and therefore I cannot make a decision. It's like, well, because we don't have an open bottle of that one. And we don't want to, it's not very much of it around. We don't want to open a bottle of it just to write the tasting notes. We haven't got any notes for it. I'm really sorry, do you have some? Please submit your tasting notes. But yeah, so we're trying to create that experience of it, and it's all about, for us, flavor. And so whether we've done our new rum classification, trying to split things up by process and how they're made, but equally as important as that side of things, which is the technical and more difficult, and that's the stuff we've worked on, looking at what Luca Gargano and Richard Sale have done to try and expand on their ideas and create something that's more, theirs is more for them and what they make and what they champion, whereas we have to be slightly more neutral. We're a shop who sells everything. So Richard and Luca's system can sometimes come across, and this is no criticism of it because it's not the same thing, as good rum and shit rum. Is the sort of way that sometimes the way that it's presented is, this is stuff that we like, that we make and we champion, and this is the other stuff that we don't. There is a place for that other stuff as well. So we've done this sort of technical thing which pulls apart, tries to show you all the different ways things are made to make in a less value judgment kind of way. There is still a little bit of value judgment in there, but that's a different matter.
Light and uncomplicated is my favorite passive aggressive.
That's when we get to the flavor counts. Light and uncomplicated, you should have seen how long of all of the flavor counts we did 6 for rum, and light and uncomplicated took weeks of Dawn and I going back and forth because we knew what the concepts were. We just needed to put words to them, and light and uncomplicated was the least bad, I think, is probably the way of putting that. A lot of them were very much value judgments on those sort of things. But things, so light and uncomplicated is not necessarily a bad thing. There's a load of light Havana clubs in there as well, which are great rums and have a place in the world, and they do a thing. But they are light and they are uncomplicated because of the way they're made and the focus they're going for. You also get rums from anonymous large producer whose name I could not possibly mention, but you know exactly who I'm talking about. That, I think, well, I don't know. Anyway, which are, cane vodkas. They go in the same group. But within that group is a whole range of flavor, and people can come in and see the similarities from the products which are less expensive and are more for different purposes, through to things which are more refined and more interesting and different. It's all about introducing people and showing people different ways to go between them. And so I know that in the whiskey world and in the SMWS do this already with flavor camps like we do. I know I've spoken to a few rum producers who've asked us about our various different classifications and how they could potentially use them in their own labeling and their own descriptions of things. People are becoming more and more aware that stepping away from technical descriptions and combining them with flavor descriptions means that people across the spectrum of knowledge can jump in. Well, yeah, I'm not talking about single class nation flavorometer, but that's another thing. Joshua and Jason, again, they're all about flavor, and so they're doing things like that. There's different people in different places having the same idea and implementing it in different ways, but it's all on that same thing of giving people more information that is subjective or trying to be objective, but giving you some information about stuff that's useful to you. I would say that in a column distilled spirit, the number of plates in the still is significantly less important than what it tastes like. And that's the thing. It's a lovely thing to know how many plates are in your still. Harlan Wheatley's CLIX vodka, which has got the CLIX as the Roman numerals, so the number of distillations, so the number of plates in the column. That tells you absolutely nothing in comparison to just putting that next to a rye vodka and a potato vodka and saying, talk about how the three of them are different, talk about the flavor differences. CLIX is a nice branding thing and everything like that, but it's not useful to the consumer.
What's similar in rum with Coroni, for example, like looking at you could look at all the plates in the column for that, but it's the way they distilled it and take it off these off a certain number of lower plates, and it's a very different flavor experience to what you'd normally expect from a large column still.
That's interesting information, which does give you information about the flavor in the end and things like that. But still, as geeky, you can have that in one place, but as long as you say also it is this style, here's some notes, here's a camp of flavor it sits in,
The diesel camp.
Yeah. Tastes like petrol, tastes like bad rum, sort of. Oh dear. Richard Seale's comments on the wonders of Coroni spirit have ruined me for Coroni a bit, even if I still do occasionally go back to the one bottle. I got one bottle with this much left in it, and it's one of the most violently strange things I have in my cabinet. Matured in Scotland as well, just to make sure it's really strange. So yes, lovely stuff.
So I'm interested to know what are some of the rums that have piqued your interest, because obviously there are some obvious choices that I would lay out if I had the flavor PPM hop junkie in my life, and obvious examples like Hampton DOK, super high ester rum, or Long Pond Tekka, or even funky releases that might not be so much talking about the esters, but things like Clarins or St. Lucian rums from Fiji even, which have like much higher both esters but also flavor congeners and other things going on with them. So I'm curious to know what has piqued your interest in your rum journey so far.
On the beer and the whiskey side of things are quite different. So I took, when Clarence Saint-Just first landed at the Whisky Exchange, bought a bottle instantaneously because the stuff is stunning. That first batch I absolutely loved. And so I took half bottle of that in an unmarked bottle to Islay for the Islay Festival. And I went round at a party that we had in Beaumont, and I made people drink it. And I've never seen such a confused group of people in my life. Where I say, trust me, whiskey person, drink this clear liquid. And they go, why would you make me do this? Shut up and drink the thing. My favorite one was mate Graham from Canada, whose comment was, this is like the shit I make in my garage. Don't tell the government. And proper, rustic rum, literally himself getting sugarcane, squidging it, making rum at home badly and trying to learn how to do it better. It's like, this is what I'm trying to do. This is the good version of that. But on the beer side, people who love the vegetal hop notes and that side of things, with those the fruit and the having that connection back to the raw ingredient when it's more of a sort of planty vegetal thing, which you don't get so much in the whiskey world. Those people absolutely bloody love Claret. But people who like smoky whiskey, not so much for the flavor of smoke, but for the extremeness of it, they like Claret. Again, it's the extremophiles will jump on stuff like that. They'll jump on the really silly long ponds and things. But fruitiness, that extreme estery fruitiness, that's the hop junkies. That's the extremophiles. So those ones, definitely. There is nothing wrong with being an extremophile. I am the person who loves this stuff. When it is so sour, it will literally burn your face off. Literally is the wrong word there. That's a lie. It's not literally burning anything at all. I took this down to my mum's last bottle of this in the same batch, actually, a few years back. This one's a few years old now. They've changed all their branding, so this is an older one. What's this? 2015. Oh, how about that? It's 5 years old. I should probably save that for another couple of years. Anyway, I took a bottle down to show my mum sour beer. My mum is someone who loves flavour. She loves beer. She's not allowed beer anymore because she's intolerant to gluten and stuff, and she wine drinker mostly. Does love a Manhattan. I taught her how to make Manhattans, and now I have to regularly send her bottles of vermouth. It's awful. But I opened a bottle of it, and she took a single sip and said, "Why would you do that? Both you and them. Why?" And I put the bottle in the fridge, and it lasted me 3 days. 75 cl bottle, because it is that one, I hadn't had a bottle of this for a long time, and I was just like, the impact of flavor and the sourness, and boom. Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with being an extremophile. It really, there's extremes of flavor and like that. In the rum world, though, on the whiskey side of things, really, I focused, the things I introduce people to are the sort of like the more everyday sipping things. I don't push towards the extremes. I don't push towards the over the top things. But yeah, there's loads of those just classic, well matured, generally no sugar added rums are the ones that people go for. Mitch, you seem to have frozen with a gigantic grin on your face. I think your internet's may have gone. Oh, no. So it seems I'm in charge now. So, but yeah, Fiona, I'm running out of my stash, both of Orval and of Gers. My yearly trip to Brussels to stock up on all the local boozes has definitely fallen by the wayside at the moment. So, yeah. Mitch. Oh no, Mitch is gone. There we go. Yeah, well, next time I come over to Brussels yearly, Chris, he's coming back now. On my way to a festival called Malt over in Nijmegen, and I stop in Brussels because that's where the Eurostar goes, and it's awful. It's, for some reason, there's always a couple of hours gap between my Eurostar and the train up from Brussels through various places up to get to Nijmegen. It's almost as if I plan it that I can run the 20 minutes to Cantillon, have my glass of fresh lambic for breakfast, stock up on as many bottles as I can get off the shelf into my bag, and then get back to the station to grab myself a croquette and then jump on a train. It's almost like it's planned or something. But yeah, again, talking on the beer front, Fiona, you mentioned a couple of times Rodenbach and de Chester Bourgogne, these Flanders Red style beers, which probably came from the UK. There's a story that Rodenbach learnt from Burton-on-Trent brewers how to make their beer, and Burton beer back in the day was probably sour. I'm not sure about it, and having tried some old ales, I'm more sure of it. There's some Gale's Old Ale, may it rest in peace. It's one of my favourite things ever. It's a great sour beer. But yeah, so those sort of flavours, the fruitiness in those definitely is one of those ones where I can introduce whiskey people to those and beer people to whiskey through them. And rum is one of those things I've not done that with so far. But, people playing around with red wine casks and sherry casks and things like that and rum have created these flavours which cross over with whiskey a lot more. And it's those crossover things for most of the time. The extremophiles will jump or whatever. People who love extremes of flavour, they'll jump back and forth between categories. But your average whiskey drinker, yeah, it's Foursquare. I'm obviously going to say Foursquare is the thing generally I go for. Also Black Tot, because of the way that it has come from people who love whiskey and have learned about rum. And as they've learned more about rum, they've created this rum with that background of whiskey in there as well. So it does its rummy thing, but it's got enough of a whiskey informed background that it's a great sort of bridging the gap tool as well.
Well, I think there's still, and this has come up a lot as we've discussed already this week, but there's still that perception that, all rum must be sweet, which is obviously just incorrect. But until there are more examples and more availability of dry rums as well as rums which have added sugar to them, it might take a little while for the whiskey world to catch on, which isn't always a bad thing. We can still you can still build a pretty decent rum collection at quite a reasonable price compared to the equivalent in the whiskey world, I would say. So we're trying to make the most of that whilst we can. Now's a good time to build your rum back
even
bar.
over the last decade.
And on Friday we can look at that as well. That's going to be the subject.
Rum is definitely a good place to jump in at the moment. Whiskey is now started becoming silly. I still buy lots of whiskey because this is not mine. Anybody who's joined this is not mine. This is the boss's. He just let me use the rum. It is real. It's not a Zoom background. But somebody earlier in the week said, "Oh, I thought it was yours." It's like, dude, seriously, look, there's Cannon Head Dumpies at the top. I do not own them. Anyway, but rum, no, it's one of those ones. Yeah, you can pick up some fantastic rums at the moment for really good price, and whiskey has really hit a place now where there are loads of great value whiskeys out there. Yeah, every day you can get them normally whiskeys, not every day as in everyday quality, but great whiskeys that are readily available. There's loads of them out there at good pricing, but it's the weird and wonderful special things that come out which now have that premium. In the rum world, great range of great drinks you can jump on, which are easily available, and there's increasingly lots more of these weird and wonderful special things, and the prices of them, while going up, are still reasonable. The Foursquare exclusives, the weird and wonderful New Mount Gay things, Velia, that's getting a bit expensive, and Luca knows it. So, no, when you do three rums in a series, and the three rums are what's it called? What's the one we did, which was Hereditas? We did for like 80 quid a bottle. Premise, I think it was at the same time. That was about 65 quid a bottle. And then Patrimonio, Lucas one was like 250, 300 quid a bottle. So, okay, you can see that maybe there's a sort of a different, it was a different thing. He goes to this more premium end of thing. So there are, that premium market is emerging in the rum world. But that means that there are some great rums at loads of different price levels. If you can afford that higher price, if you have the money to spend on those, there is something weird or wonderful for you as well. But if you don't, you can still find great, strange rums that you're not going to find elsewhere. But every day, really good pricing still. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Billy. It's been a wonderful chat, and really great to sort of dive into the extremities of the booze world with you today. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop them down or send them to us on the Black Tot stand as well, and I will do my best to answer anything for you. And we'll also be putting all these sessions up on our Black Tot YouTube channel as well, so you'll be able to watch back at your leisure, or show them to a friend who needs some education, or perhaps someone venturing into the world of extremophiles. So, Billy, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure
very much.
To chat with you. And
an empty coffee cup is all I can offer. I've got to go and do some samples of some new Whisky Exchange things, which will be hitting the website very soon. I may have to have a glass for quality control as they fall into teeny tiny sample bottles. One of them is quite extreme. Anyway, thank you very much, man.
Wonderful
Good to see you. See you soon. Bye, everybody.
Take care. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.